Russia and Ukraine have exchanged deadly attacks in the past few days, and in the latest, the Ukrainian military has raised its level of alert of a potential massive Russian drone attack. Earlier, the Russian President Vladimir Putin had vowed to intensify his attacks on Ukraine. The threat followed an attack on the Russian city of Belgorod on Saturday. The Ukrainian Air Force on one of its telegram announced that multiple missiles were in fact flying towards Kiev. A nationwide air alert has also been raised over a potential threat of Russian bombers. The Air Force is speculating that Moscow has fired cruise missiles from the Tu-95MS aircraft. They further added that at least about 16 of the Tu-95MS strategic bombers have been spotted in the country's airspace. On Monday, Russia launched a record number of 90 Shahed-type drones across Ukraine. At least 5 people are said to have been killed in a New Year's attack on Ukraine's Odessa and the Russian-occupied city of Donetsk. Now, the Russian drone attack on Lviv damaged a university building in the area, and emergency services were seen scrambling to put out the flames caused by the Russian drones. On the same day, in the Ukrainian city of Odessa, at least about 1 person was killed and 9 others were injured in another Russian drone attack. The authorities have said that the Russian drones that fell over the region caused a fire in several residential buildings.
This attack took place while we were celebrating our Ukrainian New Year. Who would even think of doing such things? What an animal could do such things, knowing well that people sat down to celebrate.
Referring to the Ukrainian attack on Belgorod, the Russian President Vladimir Putin called the aggression a terror attack. He's also accused the Ukrainian forces of, quote-unquote, a deliberate strike against civilians.
For our part, we're going to intensify the strikes, of course. No crime against civilians will rest unpunished. That's for certain.
The Russian Defense Ministry has also confirmed that Ukraine hit Belgorod with 2 missiles and several rockets. The ministry has said that most weapons were in fact shot down, but some debris fell on the city. Now, as per the Russian officials, Saturday's air attack has killed at least about 25 people and has left over 100 others wounded. And this attack was the deadliest to have struck the Russian soil since the beginning of its invasion of Ukraine.
Now the business news. Are the Western sanctions on Russia finally hurting the country's trade? Well, the latest data on India's crude imports from Russia attests to this scenario.
And according to data intelligence provider, now there are 6 tankers carrying Russian so-called grade oil were unable to supply to India, and because of payment issues amid increasing sanctions on Moscow, India's crude oil imports from its a major source, Russia, plummeted in December to their lowest level since January 2023. Now, oil imports from Russia have slowly but surely fallen from an all-time high of 2.15 million barrels per day in May, and the crude imports have fallen dramatically to 1.48 million barrels per day between November and December.
Our top focus right now is our continuous coverage of the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia and Ukraine have exchanged deadly attacks over the past few days. And in the latest, the Ukrainian military has raised alerts of a massive Russian drone attack. Earlier, the Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed to intensify attacks on Ukraine. The threat followed an attack on the Russian city of Belgorod on Saturday. The Ukrainian Air Force on Telegram announced that multiple missiles were flying towards Kiev. Nationwide air alerts have been raised over a potential threat of Russian bombers. The Air Force is speculating that Moscow has fired cruise missiles from Tu-95MS aircraft. They added that at least 16 of the Tu-95MS strategic bombers have been spotted in the country's airspace. On Monday, Russia launched a record number of 90 Shahed-type drones across Ukraine. At least 5 people were killed in a New Year's Day attack on Ukraine's Odessa and the Russian-occupied city of Donetsk. The Russian drone attack on Lviv damaged a university building in the area. The emergency services were seen scrambling to put out the fire caused by the Russian drones. On the same very day, in the Ukrainian city of Odessa, at least 1 person was killed and 9 others were injured in yet another Russian drone attack. The officials, Ukrainian forces, and I'm quoting here, an intentional strike against the civilians.
For our part, we're going to intensify the strikes, of course. No crime against civilians will rest unpunished. That's for certain.
The Russian Defense Ministry has confirmed that Ukraine hit Belgorod with 2 missiles and several rockets. The ministry said that most weapons were shot down, but some debris fell onto the city as well. As per the Russian officials, Saturday's air attack killed at least 25 people and left over 100 others wounded. This attack was the deadliest to have struck the Russian soil since the beginning of its invasion of Ukraine.
Moving on. As the conflict between Moscow and Kiev escalates, 5 people have been killed in attacks on Ukraine's southern Odessa region and the eastern city of Donetsk.